On March 28th, a large squadron of Stryker vehicles and accompanying infantry took posts along the U.S. Mexico border around El Paso. President Donald Trump has decided to make good on his promise to root out Mexican drug cartels, one of the main causes of friction in U.S. Mexico relations over the previous decade. To that end, moving military vehicles and increasing border security and surveillance will drastically curb cartel activity between the two countries. But what is the true extent of U.S. involvement in fighting Mexican cartels, especially given they primarily operate within Mexico, where the U.S. military can't go so easily? Why did the U.S. military choose Stryker vehicles to bolster border security? And how will this reflect on the currently hectic U.S.-Mexico relations? Stick around to find out on today's episode of The Military Show. Let's start with reports of Trump ordering Stryker vehicles in El Paso to provide vital reconnaissance and surveillance against cartel movement across the U.S.-Mexico border. According to a report from Fox News, the U.S. military sent 2 Strykers to the U.S.-Mexico border. One of them is positioned to get a bird's-eye view over Juarez, Mexico, considered one of the busiest places in terms of human and drug trafficking, with an unusually high number of the so-called gotaways, or illegal immigrants who manage to go over the wall, then escape the U.S. Borders and Customs patrols by blending into the crowd. The 2 Strykers are just the first wave of mechanized infantry reinforcements in the area, with more vehicles expected to arrive at the border over the next few weeks. A report from Business Insider on April 5th indicates that there could be as many as 100 Strykers dispersed throughout the area between Yuma, Arizona, and El Paso, Texas, along with hundreds of soldiers to man and support them. Why are these Strykers so important? Well, unlike what some reports are suggesting, a Stryker technically isn't a tank. Instead, it's a multi-purpose combat vehicle that has several modification options that allow it to adapt to the current needs on and off the battlefield. With that in mind, the current Strykers that the U.S. military has sent to El Paso don't seem to have any active armaments on them. They're currently being used for surveillance and have a higher carrying capacity than similar combat vehicles while maintaining defensive armor to allow them to fight efficiently. However, we need to dig a bit deeper into the vehicle's history to truly understand why they are the ones being deployed. To be more precise, a Stryker isn't a single vehicle model, but an entire family of practically interchangeable pieces. It represents one of the U.S. Army's most adaptable combat platforms, serving as the backbone of the medium-weight, rapidly deployable Stryker Brigade Combat Teams, or SBCTs. First deployed in 2003, these 8-wheeled armored vehicles bridge the gap between heavy armored units and light infantry forces, making them uniquely positioned to benefit mechanized infantry the most. What makes the Stryker particularly notable is its fundamental design philosophy centered on versatility. It has a chassis that's common across all vehicles in the family and has also been built in tandem with attachment systems and turrets that fit on top of it. This means each Stryker can, at least in theory, be rapidly configured into over 10 different variants. These include infantry carriers, mobile gun systems, medical evacuation vehicles, reconnaissance platforms, mortar carriers, and anti-tank missile platforms. This modular approach allows the U.S. commanders to tailor their force package to mission requirements. The base infantry carrier vehicle, the ICV, can transport a 9-infantry soldier squad, plus a crew of 2, while providing protection against small arms fire and artillery fragments. This is essentially the version of the vehicle that has been shipped to El Paso, with few armament options at present. With a top speed of about 60 miles per hour and a range of approximately 300 miles, these Strykers can rapidly relocate and provide valuable cover and fire support. And if the U.S. Army actually decides to outfit the Strykers with weapon systems, then they can truly shine. In Iraq from 2003 to 2011, Strykers proved exceptionally valuable in urban combat. Their combination of mobility, protection, and firepower was well suited for the streets of Baghdad, Mosul, and Samarra. The vehicle's relatively quiet operation and ability to navigate narrow streets made them effective for patrols in towns and cities, as well as allowing them to react quickly to ambushes or sudden changes in operation scopes. During operations in Sadr City and Mosul, Stryker units demonstrated their ability to quickly establish a presence, conduct operations, and withdraw before insurgent forces could organize counterattacks. Their speed allowed for what commanders called tactical surprise, even in dense urban environments. Then in Afghanistan from 2009 to 2021, Strykers faced a different set of challenges. The rugged terrain initially raised questions about the vehicle's suitability, but modifications, including the installation of mine rollers and slat armor, enhanced their effectiveness. Stryker units in southern Afghanistan could cover large areas of responsibility that would have been impossible for dismounted infantry alone. The double V hull, or DVH variant, introduced in response to the IED threat in Afghanistan, dramatically improved crew survivability. This adaptation demonstrated the platform's ability to evolve to meet emerging battlefield threats. While there's no telling if the US does indeed plan to use the Strykers more offensively, these three scenarios could be similar to what they would encounter if they were deployed into Mexico against cartels. With the bulk of cartel activity in towns and cities, the Strykers could prove monumental in similar urban combat scenarios as they were in the War on Terror. Furthermore, the Mexican climate and varied geography would make the Strykers shine as eight-wheeled rather than tracked vehicles due to their improved mobility and versatility. But Strykers have proven equally valuable in non-combat scenarios. During humanitarian assistance operations following Hurricane Katrina in 2005, Strykers navigated flooded streets to reach stranded civilians. Their capabilities of fording water, though limited, allowed them to ford water obstacles that stopped other vehicles. In peacekeeping operations in Kosovo, Strykers projected presence while presenting a less aggressive profile than tanks or Bradley fighting vehicles. Their relatively low ground pressure also meant less damage to civilian infrastructure. During NATO exercises in Eastern Europe, Strykers demonstrated strategic mobility by conducting road marches across multiple countries, showcasing the Army's ability to rapidly deploy combat power along NATO's eastern flank. This non-combat potential means that Strykers might not even need to be outfitted with weapons and armaments. If the US uses its infantry for a bulk of U.S. Mexico border operations, the vehicles could simply be used as backup or transport without degrading the defensive potential of units stationed nearby. The Stryker platform continues to evolve. Recent upgrades include improved protection systems, more powerful engines, and enhanced digital communications. The Stryker Dragoon variant, equipped with a 30mm cannon, was rapidly developed and deployed to Europe to counter emerging threats, demonstrating the platform's adaptability. The CROWS-J, or Common Remotely Operated Weapons Station Javelin integration, allows Strykers to engage armored threats while on the move, significantly expanding their anti-armor capabilities without requiring a specialized variant. As the Army looks toward multi-domain operations, Strykers are being equipped with electronic warfare packages, counter-UAS systems, and advanced networking capabilities, ensuring this versatile platform will remain relevant. This can be doubly important in the current standoff between cartels and Mexican and US administrations. The US has recently started launching more surveillance operations against cartels, particularly aiming to create a presence surrounding the US Mexico border and the areas most affected by cartel activity. The Strykers could be integrated as ground-based surveillance and data link units to provide more effective and faster communication in case the conflict becomes more violent than it is. And the two Strykers that have been deployed to El Paso have already had some effect on local cartel activity. According to one report, the vehicles have been an effective deterrent against immigration attempts and illegal border crossings. The vehicles can use infrared optics to spot immigrants trying to cross the border when the agents on the ground can't, heavily improving the US Border Patrol's detection capabilities. As such, the number of encounters with immigrants has dropped from a staggering 1,134 on March 27, 2024, to just 32 on the same day in 2025. Of course, a part of that has been due to Trump heavily curbing immigration policies and backtracking many changes made during the previous administration of President Joe Biden. And while the Border Patrols are attempting to have zero encounters with illegal immigrants, there's still a long way to go, particularly due to the complex dynamics between the two countries in regard to immigration and cartel activity. As of late 2024, unauthorized immigration at the U.S. Mexico border reached unprecedented levels. Department of Homeland Security data revealed approximately 2.5 million encounters at the southwest border in fiscal year 2023, continuing a trend of record-high numbers that began in 2021. The estimated undocumented immigrant population in the U.S. stood at approximately 11 to 12 million people, with significant increases in arrivals from countries beyond Mexico and Northern Triangle nations. The Department of Homeland Security also reported remarkable increases in the number of migrants from Venezuela, Cuba, Haiti, and countries across South America, Africa, and Asia. The Remain in Mexico policy, briefly revived under court order during the Biden administration, was ultimately terminated in 2022. By 2024, it no longer applied, as the administration pursued alternative approaches to manage migration flows. The Trump administration's approach to immigration from 2017 to 21 centered on deterrence. President Trump implemented a zero-tolerance policy that resulted in family separations and constructed approximately 460 miles of border wall. His administration reconfigured the Migrant Protection Protocols, commonly known as Remain in Mexico or MPP, while reducing refugee admissions to historic lows. As COVID-19 emerged, the administration utilized Title 42 to rapidly expel immigrants and apply pressure on Mexico through tariff threats to increase enforcement. Mexico responded to these pressures by deploying its National Guard to its southern border and intensifying migration enforcement throughout the country. The relationship became increasingly transactional, with immigration enforcement serving as a bargaining chip in broader bilateral negotiations. When the Biden administration took office in 2021, it initially charted a different course. President Biden suspended border wall construction and the MPP program while raising refugee caps. His administration also created legal pathways for certain nationals via parole programs. Although the administration attempted to end Title 42 in 2022, court rulings blocked the move, ultimately keeping the policy in place until May 2023, much longer than many immigration advocates had expected. As border crossings surged to record levels, the Biden administration pivoted toward more restrictive policies by mid-2023. They implemented an asylum ban for those who didn't seek protection in transit countries and established migration resource centers in Latin America, hoping to process potential migrants before they reached the U.S. border. This evolution in policy reflected the administration's struggle to balance humanitarian concerns with the political and logistical challenges of managing unprecedented migration flows. Then we get to 2025 with a new administration, and Trump has wasted no time in making big moves on immigration, especially when it comes to Mexico. One of the first things he did was declare a national emergency at the southern border. That gave him the green light to send military forces and get construction on the border wall going again. To speed things up, he even waived some environmental rules, including for a new 2.5-mile section near Jacumba Hot Springs in California. He also brought back the Remain in Mexico policy. That means people seeking asylum in the US but coming from other countries now have to wait in Mexico while their cases are being processed. It's a way to cut down on illegal crossings and ease the load on immigration detention centers in the US. On top of that, the Department of Homeland Security reversed a major Biden-era policy. Around 936,500 migrants who came in using the CBP One app were told they had to leave the country on their own, basically self-deport. Another 532,000 people from countries like Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela lost their parole status, and if they don't comply, they face removal and permanent bans from re-entering. Trump also ramped up the military presence at the border. About 10,000 active duty troops and 2,500 National Guard members have been deployed, and it's not just boots on the ground. There are armored vehicles, helicopters, and even Navy destroyers being used to monitor and secure the area. That show of force has played a big role in cutting down illegal crossings. And it's working, at least according to the numbers we just mentioned concerning encounters with illegal migrants. The Trump administration is taking credit, pointing to the tougher enforcement and stricter rules they've put in place since January. And the Strykers are essentially the natural next step in the plan. So Trump is doubling down on hardline immigration policies, especially when it comes to Mexico and the southern border. But that also reflects on the U.S. Mexico relations when it comes to dealing with cartels. Before 2018, the Mexican administration tried and failed to contain cartels by removing their leadership. This did little to combat the actual cartel operations, as they were largely decentralized. If a leader was removed, another would pop up, or the cartel itself would split, with the resulting power struggle creating even more violence in the streets. President López Obrador's "hugs not bullets" approach marked a significant departure from previous strategies that were tried before he took office in 2018. Rather than confronting cartels directly, Obrador focused on addressing what he viewed as the root causes of crime through social programs. He limited U.S. security operation, particularly DEA operations, creating tension in bilateral security relationships. Obrador also created the National Guard, but rather than focusing primarily on cartel violence, this force became increasingly dedicated to immigration enforcement. Throughout his administration, Mexico continued to experience high rates of homicides and disappearances. By 2024, his approach faced widespread criticism as cartel violence remained endemic throughout the country. Strategic territories like Sinaloa, Michoacán, and Tamaulipas continued to experience significant cartel control. The 2023 kidnapping of 4 Americans in Matamoros brought international attention to these persistent security challenges. Meanwhile, Mexican cartels were transforming significantly during this period. They increasingly fragmented from major cartels into numerous smaller groups and diversified beyond drugs into fuel theft, extortion, and human trafficking. Several cartels, particularly the Jalisco New Generation cartel, expanded their territorial control. They developed more sophisticated weapons and tactics while increasing the production of synthetic drugs, especially fentanyl. The DEA reported in 2024 that Mexican cartels remained the primary source of fentanyl in the US, with the Sinaloa cartel and CJNG controlling the majority of production and distribution networks. This prompted Trump to make bold claims of going to war against cartels and even deploying US troops into the country, which would create significant geopolitical backlash. U.S. Mexico relations experienced significant strain over immigration and security issues throughout this period. Cooperation oscillated based on U.S. pressure tactics and Mexican domestic priorities. Mexico deployed record numbers of security forces to address immigration enforcement, particularly when threatened with economic consequences by the U.S. However, joint security operations decreased under Obrador, and information sharing on cartel activities became more limited. The U.S. increasingly viewed fentanyl trafficking as a national security threat, while Mexico resisted characterizations that threatened its sovereignty. Despite these tensions, economic integration through USMCA continued. High-level security dialogue resumed in late 2023, but yielded limited results as fundamental differences in approach remained unsolved. Mexico's institutional corruption remained pervasive throughout this period, limiting effective security operations. Impunity rates for violent crimes stayed above 95%, undermining deterrence efforts. Mexican security forces continue to find themselves outgunned and outmaneuvered by well-financed cartel operations. Economic alternatives to cartel participation developed too slowly to provide viable options for vulnerable populations. Meanwhile, the U.S. public's demand for drugs continued unabated, providing steady revenue streams for criminal organizations. Border security measures failed to significantly impact cartel operations, as these groups quickly adapted to new enforcement patterns. Then Obrador was replaced by current President Claudia Sheinbaum in late 2024. Sheinbaum acknowledged that cartels needed to be dealt with at the core, but enacted a much more aggressive approach than Obrador. Early in her administration, she deployed thousands of troops to areas plagued by cartel violence, signaling a move towards direct engagement with organized crime groups. Additionally, her administration has formed an elite civilian force, the National Operations Unit, UNO, aimed at dismantling large criminal organizations through enhanced intelligence and investigative capabilities. Sheinbaum's first term as president came in the middle of a large wave of violence that shook Mexico, partially due to the U.S. intelligence services arresting two major leaders of the Sinaloa cartel. This resulted in the Sinaloa cartel essentially dividing itself into its major operational parts, but all of them wanted the power and prestige that the entire cartel had before the arrests. This led to Trump further provoking the Mexican administration by making comments about directly using U.S. troops in Mexico, which Mexico claimed would be a breach of its sovereignty. Then in January, Trump declared several cartels were terrorist organizations, which further escalated the tensions between the two administrations. Sheinbaum considered the act unilateral, coming with no prior announcement to the Mexican administration, and would likely constitute a breach of Mexico's sovereignty. Additionally, Sheinbaum declared that the U.S. moving its troops into Mexican borders would constitute foreign interference and intervention, which would not be tolerated. In response to the U.S. designations, she proposed constitutional reforms aimed at safeguarding Mexico's sovereignty and preventing potential foreign interventions. Despite these tensions, Mexico did demonstrate a commitment to bilateral cooperation by extraditing 29 major cartel figures, including Rafael Caro Quintero, formerly the leader of the Guadalajara cartel, to the U.S. for prosecution. This action coincided with high-level meetings between Mexican officials and the Trump administration, reflecting an effort to address security concerns collaboratively while upholding Mexico's sovereignty. But the U.S. continued to ramp up its border presence, and the Strykers are just the most recent additions to the lineup. During a House Armed Services Committee hearing on April 1st, Pentagon officials noted that 6,700 active-duty troops had already been deployed to the U.S. Mexico border, in addition to about 2,500 National Guardsmen that were already stationed there. However, these troops can't actually apprehend illegal immigrants, making them essentially just a deterrent against cartel activity and potential violence. The U.S. military has also deployed two guided missile Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, the USS Gravely and the USS Spruance. Both the Gravely and the Spruance had previously been deployed in the Middle East and were part of the U.S. interventions against the Houthi-controlled regions in Yemen. Utilizing destroyers alongside the U.S.-Mexico border allows the U.S. to maintain an insurmountable aerial presence in the Gulf of Mexico, where a large portion of the drug trade occurs. Spy planes and drones have also been flying regular surveillance and intelligence missions along the border. High-altitude reconnaissance aircraft like the U-2 Dragon Lady and the Boeing RC-135 Rivet Joint have been spotted conducting ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance operations over parts of Mexico. The Navy has also deployed Boeing P-8 Poseidon aircraft to patrol coastal aircraft and support maritime surveillance along the southern border. In addition to manned aircraft, MQ-9 Reaper drones have reportedly been operating in the region as well. These uncrewed systems are equipped for both surveillance and strike missions. On top of that, the Trump administration has ordered Pentagon intelligence agencies to turn satellite surveillance assets toward the southern border, according to a Reuters report from March. And it's highly likely that even the reported 100 Strykers are not going to be all that the US uses at the border, given Trump's aggressive stance toward ending the reign of cartel activity between the US and Mexico. The US military has 4,600 of these vehicles on active duty in the US Army alone, so it can theoretically put significantly more of them on the US Mexico border to reinforce it. But the better question is perhaps, how does Trump want to deal with the fallout from his offensive movements? While the US military presence on the border, coupled with stricter immigration controls, has slowed or stopped some of the cartel activity, Trump has also instituted severe tariffs on Mexican goods and products, further spoiling US-Mexico relations. While these events might not seem connected at first, in the administration's mind, they might be considered linked. So if Trump does end up waging a trade war with Mexico, it might decide to retaliate by outright preventing the US military from being near the border in the first place, or at least limit its usefulness to having observer and deterrent status. But what do you think? What's Trump's next step in trying to remove cartels from the US-Mexico border? Leave a comment below, and thank you as always for watching. Now go and check out What If the US Army Went to War with Mexico, day by day, or click this other video instead.